let's talk to Glynn Spangenberg. He's the chief commercial
Let's do
officer
that.
over at Locomation. We'll find out how his driver-assisted trucks potentially could help with the supply chain crisis. Now, Glenn,
Right
I
on.
saw a picture on LinkedIn. You were just at a biker truck rally about a couple weeks ago, and I made me want to ask you: are you also a biker?
I am a trucker, biker through and through.
We love it, man.
All right, man. What kind of horse do you ride when you're not riding in your 18-wheeler?
Well, I've got what's known as a bagger. It's a full dress Harley Davidson.
Nice.
I do on longer hauls, but I also have a nice little fat boy, a 2000 that I customized back in my Qualcomm days, and I call it my bar bike. So those are the two bikes that I have.
His bar bike. I love it.
I dig it. Well, Glenn, you have experience behind the wheel of not just a motorcycle, behind the wheel of a truck. Let's talk a little bit about how driver-assisted trucks could help with this thing we keep talking about, which is the supply chain crisis, and something that just seems to be getting worse. Set the table for us. What are some ways that a driver-assisted truck could actually help with this terrible situation?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction to the topic. We know that the supply chain problem has a tremendous amount of complexities. For us at Locomation, our focus is on utilization. So that's both of the tractor and the driver. Right now in the U.S. truckload marketplace, it's estimated that the utilization rate of the equipment is 30%. And that is, that in terms of supply chain, that's a whole lot of slop that you've got to put out there in terms of underutilized assets that aren't contributing to the solution. So we're starting with that as our first and core premise.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the idea is that now you can run these chains, two drivers together, right? They're just blowing right through any type of brakes eventually through it. And that improves, I don't know if it's a 100% increase on those two efficiencies, maybe 50, 60, whatever it happens to be. You tell me, what's the increase in efficiency doing that?
Yeah, you bet. So the utilization rate of the driver increases to about 30%. The utilization of the tractor itself, the driver utilization increases by 250%. The utilization of the assets themselves increase about another 30%. So it doubles up from the rate it is today on average to about 60% in total utilization. So that's, again, injecting quite a bit of new capacity into the marketplace that's ready to haul loads.
Glenn, how does automation help with this one? And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But the number one complaint that most drivers have is they get through the traffic, they get through everything, then they get through the shipper's dock, and then they're stuck there for 2 to 12 hours. Wouldn't an autonomous vehicle also be stuck for that 2 to 12 hours? Or will this extra amount of data maybe help with enforcement? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's not really enforcement. It's really kind of what Locomation is focused on right now, and that is planning your freight network for autonomy. When you begin to look at your freight network through an autonomous relay network lens, and we do these analysis, so we not only understand what the opportunity is, but we can quantify how do we actually go and get that. You're talking about a prescription for these assets at both the local and the line haul, but we're optimizing for the line haul. So you can actually solve a lot of challenges by dealing with some of that detention issue in your local operation, but in the line haul, really looking for full utilization. And that's roughly 500 miles when you consider average transit times and baking into the calculation of the prescription congestion and last minute things that happen out on the roadway. If you can start to prescribe a schedule per day where you're really maximizing both sets of use of assets, local and line haul, you're going to be able to get more than what the average is today, which is about 7 hours a day of drive time. We think you're going to get more like 11 hours. But through that prescription, it takes into account using things like from ForeKites, the data about detention at a particular location, not broadly for that shipper, but specifically for that location, time of day, and day of day of week. And if you take into those calculations the effect of that on a Wednesday afternoon versus a Thursday morning, you can actually plan for the assets to be used much better than they are today. When it comes time for actual dwell time, having a trailer ready for an autonomous truck is really all about that subscription, because you can't just say to the truck, show up and pick up and do all of that. You actually have people in place that they know what to do, when, where, why, how, and with whom, in order to ensure that that trailer connects to that autonomous vehicle and gets on the road properly.
So, Glenn, back in the early days, way back in the early days, like 2 years ago, I don't know if you remember these videos where they showed like the two drivers going into one. You got the lead vehicle and you got the one behind, but they would show one drop off, right,
Yes.
and maybe another one come in, and they have an open signal like, "Hey, I'm ready. You can grab me or whatever." Is that still the thinking moving forward? There these trains, although they're not linked, right? They're wirelessly
Right.
linked, I
Electronically
suppose.
linked.
Wirelessly, yeah. It could be more than two or three and drop on, jump in, and that type of stuff as you're going down the road.
Yeah, now there's infrastructure concerns that need to be taken into account when you talk about how many of these
Yeah.
you put into a convoy, because it is increasing the density, the wear and the tear on both bridges and roadways. So you have to take that into account. But to get to really your point, it's about this marketplace where, and this is where the vision is going. This marketplace where a driver says, "Hey, I have one of these autonomous followers, and I can also I'm a 5-star leader." Of a
Hmm.
convoy. And so I'm going to be available on this date in the future at this particular location. And the whole goal is that each one of these drivers, now we talk about being a human guided autonomy. So now you've got two drivers who can do the infield work, who now, according to what they've been prescribed in their dispatch, now they know where to meet up on the interstate and the point at which the follower driver gets to let the hair down, go into autonomy mode, shift out of the seat, and go off duty not driving while the
Right.
first driver continues using their hours of service. The follower is off duty and the wheels are still turning. So it's still making the money and it's still raising the utilization of both the driver and the asset.
Let's talk about that human aided autonomy because we've spoken to a few different
Yeah.
autonomous truck companies and they all have different angles. But I have to say that Locomation probably has the most flesh human driver
Hmm.
focus, right?
Sure.
And the most realistic one about regulation. Some of
Mm.
these other companies are like, no, no,
Agreed.
they're on the road, they'll be everywhere. They're on the road, they'll be everywhere. And your company's taking a much more measured approach. Is that by design?
By design, absolutely. By reducing the complexity of the problem that you have to solve for, and that is, how do I get the truck to do what I've intended it to do in this operation? So if you have no bounds on it, meaning you've got a solo driverless truck, a truck with no driver that is navigating surface streets and interstates and very complex situations, you have to plan for studying those and putting a safety case together. And you never know if your safety case is complete. You never know if you got that one last scenario that actually is going to be the death of someone in the future. By reducing the complexity of the problem to a supervised convoy, where you have a driver in the lead who's cognitively engaged in the process of supervising an autonomous convoy because they've been certified, trained, and all to do that. They're a more highly skilled driver. They're watching out for all of the outliers in the convoy. For example, if we have to take a detour and go off road in the dirt, I, as the supervisor driver, can say it'd be better for me to pull over and wait the 2 hours for them to clear the roadway or whatever, so we can stay on the interstate. They can actually be involved in the decision making for a lot of what the machine will eventually learn to do, but today is supervised by that leader driver.
Very interesting. I was wondering about the drivers and the training to be like a 5-star platoon leader or whatever you want to call it. They're a train leader. You don't want followers. They're rating them afterwards. Like, don't follow Glynn Spangenberg. You don't know where the hell he's going, right? Don't let when you get on.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So,
Well,
are you guys?
and by the way, that's a long vision.
Yeah, I bet it is. So the solution of focusing on the over the highway, right? Is that kind of solve the issue where they're talking about, you talk about AV vehicles and then they hit a center outside the city and then a driver takes over, right? You don't have to switch or do that drop and hook at these drop yards outside the city, right? Is that kind of the thinking there?
Correct. And you can. So again, we're human guided autonomy. We have drivers that are in the loop doing the things that they need to do day in and day out. So meeting the shipper, securing the load, taking care of the paperwork, and then getting out to the point on the interstate. And it's that point on the interstate, and these we call them autonomous relay network segments. And they're denoted by nodes that have a relay component to it, knows how to deal with autonomous trucks coming
Mm.
in, trailers turning around and going into the local operation. But that really is kind of where the fine tuning is, to say that's exactly where today's instantiation of autonomous trucks could realistically go into commercial operations sooner rather than later. And then, of course, as the progression of the technology grows and we see more and better and different scenarios where autonomy really makes commercial sense now, we'll be engineering that right into this autonomous relay network. So it starts from today. There is no autonomous truck. Looking at it through that lens gives you a 5 to 7% profit improvement today, just by looking at it through the lens of the future, in terms of how you plan the freight for autonomy. But then leading up to a 30% cost reduction, 250% improvement in asset utilization, 30% improvement in driver utilization, 66 metric tons per truck in reduced CO2 certifiable for the shipper. That's all of what we're preparing for today to be ready for.
Awesome.
Glenn, thank you so much. A lot of promise moving forward in the future. We appreciate it. Thanks for sharing all that with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting us do it.
Thanks, man. Check
Thanks,
out
Lynn.
locomation.ai for
Yeah,
more
very cool
information.
stuff.